second point is the inner circle. The idea, the notion here is, as a business owner, you've decided you want to sell the company, or you've decided it's time to start to look at options and explore that. You're not quite sure where to go first. Who do you call first? You don't want to go sort of asking people randomly for fear that the rumor mill could start and people could start speculating about what your plans are. So there's a question about how do you manage your discussions with external parties, but also how do you manage the initial discussions, particularly with your internal team. So when you put together a transaction team on the inside of the organization, it's really important to make sure that you have, particularly on the finance side of the transaction, in the finance function, that you've got the bench strength to be able to handle the due diligence process. And we heard a lot about that yesterday as well. When business owners talked about their prior experience and some things that they would do differently, what we heard come out a few times is they wish they had more fully resourced their finance function to handle all the due diligence inquiries and to manage the preparation for due diligence. So you certainly need to have an engaged and well-informed finance function as first and foremost. But there are other aspects of the inner circle and how that changes over time. But with that, I'm just going to stop talking. I'm going to ask Harry to sort of kick off the discussion on that.
I actually think, it may be the most important decision that an entrepreneur is ever going to make is to sell his business. Entrepreneurs tend to be highly secretive, private. They don't have to disclose, unlike public companies where theoretically it's out in the public domain. So the entrepreneur is constantly, in our experience, has been very closed in terms of who he's going to speak to about such sensitive information. Unfortunately, once you go into a deal process, the entrepreneur is now probably outside of his realm of expertise. So you may have been terrific driving value to his business, but really doesn't know how to go into a process. And I don't recommend, this is the self-serving recommendation, is that putting together a financial advisory team and a legal team, and then defining who in the inner circle is paramount to completing a successful transaction. Too many times entrepreneurs are waiting way too long to bring in key management people and how they're going to be incentivized to continue in this business. So we've seen a lot of deals where, unfortunately, the team is narrow. The lawyer they'll bring in has never done a transaction, but he's the trusted advisor because he did the wills or estate planning. The accountant as well has been a trusted financial person, has no transaction experience, has no idea how to value it, and is even conflicted because, I hate to say it, most accountants don't want to lose their clients and when they see a sales transaction. So this decision on once you've made the hard decision to sell, picking your team and having the right team is going to be paramount to you being successful.
Yeah, I think what I'd add to that is you got to take a step back and again, really think about what are you going to need to be successful to sell this business, and you got to look down the road on the demands. If you're running an auction, for example, there are going to be a number of market participants wanting to access data. How am I going to get that data on an online virtual data room so people can get there and with all their supplemental inquiries, and you're missing this, so who's supporting that function? There's going to be management interviews, and they're going to get into the weeds. They're going to want to know the numbers and why you're trending one way or another way. So who's answering those questions, and so forth. So really take a step back and look at who do I really need as part of my deal team as I move forward towards a purchase and sale arrangement. And keep in mind that the deal teams will get bigger. Not only your team will get bigger, you're going to need certain specialists to implement, as will the prospective purchasers as they are introduced into the process. So the deal teams will get bigger. You'll get specialists involved. You'll get outside consultants involved. There'll be, potentially an industrial company. There could be environmental consultants and so forth. So I really just echo that. Really take a step back and make sure you have the right inner circle.
And I guess I'd like to ask the audience too for some of their views in terms of who the first person would be that they would call when they start to get serious about going down this path or serious about the exploration. So who would call their accountant first? The accountants all would call their accountant first. So I have all the accountants in the room have put their hands up. That's great.
Me too.
And Harry, yeah, Harry's on board with that. So the accountant, and the accountant's usually one of the first trusted advisors that that a business owner is going to call when they have those sort of questions. Who would call their lawyer? Lawyer? A few lawyer fans. Yeah, Curtis would call the lawyer.
I'm confused.
Curtis
I
thinks
call
you
them
should-
at the same time.
Yeah. See, Harry calls them all equally at the same time. So, okay, and anyone have a sort of a business coach or a confidant, or there's some really good mentor groups like the CEO Network or the Tech Group, things like that. Does anyone have a mentor group that they would discuss this sort of thing with? Yeah, got someone in the back. Okay, that's smart. Who has? Does anyone here have a board of directors? Something that's fairly formal, board of advisors, folks that you can talk to about that. Okay. We got a fellow back there. How about, how many of you have multiple shareholders? Yeah, okay. How many generations? One generation? 3 generations. So you could have 35 shareholders. 24 shareholders, okay? Anyone else have a multi-generation family business? Yes, someone back there. And do you mind asking roughly how many shareholders? 3, okay, so a little easier to handle than 24. We were in a situation where we had 35 shareholders not too long ago. 3rd generation family business has a way of sort of multiplying, right? So one group that obviously you need to talk to is your shareholders. You need to make sure that you have a lot of aligned expectations among the shareholders. So certainly don't forget that. You don't want to be going down a situation where you have 24 shareholders or 35 shareholders. You start down a sale process without knowing whether you can deliver the shares. Because you don't know if your shareholders are going to actually approve the deal. You might have somebody who thinks the business is worth $150 million. Someone else would gladly sell for $70 million. So certainly your fellow shareholders should be among the first people that you talk to, and then you get some special cases where you might have a shareholder dispute. That's a special case, all right? And we can deal with that separately. But certainly the shareholders need to be among the first that you call. And in terms of internally, I think we've already said pretty clearly that your CFO should be among the first people to know. Who else would be among the first people in your particular cases that you would bring in? Was there someone other than the CFO that you would consider bringing in early on? Is there anyone who would know before the CFO and yourself and your shareholders? Wife, right? That's probably one of the most important shareholders, right? Okay, great. What Curtis started to say is that the deal team, do you think that your head of sales is going to be part of the deal team? Who says head of sales would be part of the deal team? Marketing, HR? If you have that? The answer is eventually, they are all part of the deal team. And they might be part of the deal team post-closing and be helping with the integration, or they might be involved in the very late stages. But chances are, when you have a potential bidder that wants to do business due diligence on your company, they definitely want to know what your sales pipeline is like. So they're probably going to want to talk to the head of sales and really understand what the pipeline looks like, okay? So that person is going to get involved in the due diligence. What happens is, as you go deeper into due diligence, more and more people who work in the business will become involved, because people will need access to them for due diligence. Of course, as the scope of the team, as the size of the team goes up, what else goes up? Risk in terms of confidentiality. The risk of leaks, right? You have a really big team, you're going to have very significant risk of leaks. Nothing against salespeople. A lot of us in here are salespeople, myself included, but salespeople aren't particularly great at keeping secrets, okay? So when you start to get sales involved, whether that's sales in your own organization or sales in a strategic buyer within the bidder organization, be very, very careful, okay? Because when you start to get those folks involved, your chances of leaks goes up exponentially. We also talk in here about bake-off hazards. Now, there are a lot of professional advisors in here, and they know what a bake-off is. A bake-off is basically a situation where, let's say you want to hold a little bit of a beauty contest among professional advisors. You've had a few investment bankers coming around pitching their wares to you, and you want to kind of let them all pitch you and make a decision about who the best one is. Or you might be doing the same thing with law firms. You might have a handful of law firms that seem pretty good. You'd like them to come and pitch you on the advisory mandate. When you have situations like that where you have professional firms baking off together against one another, be very careful because, and I've seen this before, I've seen it many times, it's actually pretty common, is that when investment bankers pitch for the sale mandate, if they lose, what do you think they do next? Any guesses? I know there's a transaction happening, I didn't get the sale mandate, so what do? They go around and they start to pitch for the buy-side mandate, okay? So they happen to know that you're considering a sale and they know that these are the top 3 strategic buyers, so they'll start to position themselves to get on the other side of the transaction. Is that avoidable? The answer is yes. It is avoidable. You can manage that. It's important to actually have those people commit to not pursue other mandates in conflict with yours without your prior consent. Okay, so you can actually, as a price of admission for baking off, they have to make that commitment to you. So there are ways that you can manage that risk, but this sort of thing happens, and it's difficult to sometimes it's difficult to anticipate those sort of things until you're actually in the situation.
So just on that, Paris, I think it's important to limit the size of your bake-off, not to go in and it's hard to get a firm to commit to that if they know there's 10 or 15 parties you're going to interview. You're going to bring it down to 3, then I think you have a better chance and leverage to get that kind of commitment.
Right. We talk about the need to know principle. I think that that's intuitive enough. So keep the circle tight. It's a really good idea to actually have your internal team members sign a document, whether it's enforceable or not. Like, make sure that there's an explicit commitment to keep it quiet, especially when you have spouses of family members, et cetera, who are working in the business. The further and further you get from the inner circle, the harder it is to contain. I think that's intuitive enough.
Just on that last point, there's probably a discussion at some point as well about counsel as well, and we wouldn't call it a bake-off, but absolutely, I suspect a lot of business owners have trusted counsel already, but they may not necessarily be M&A counsel, and so especially with some of the examples with multiple shareholders who also have their own independent counsel, you may choose to have a global transaction counsel for all shareholder groups, and there's an interview process amongst that.